Okay. All right, we're going to get started. Thanks for everybody for your patience. Welcome to the first Ember NYC of 2018. Yeah, I hope everybody had a good holiday. It's good to see all your shining faces. We have a great lineup tonight. We've got 2 lightning talks and our main event. I'll introduce each one as we go. Before I do, I want to say a couple of quick thank yous and quick announcements, and then open the floor to announcements from any of you, whether you're hiring or there's an event people should know about, or you have or something else that you want to announce. So think about that while I'm doing this next step. Tonight we are here at this meetup. This is meetup.com, if you guys don't know. You should be a member here if you're not. I just, right before the meetup, put up next month's event. There it is. They just redesigned this thing. Wait, where is it? Is proposed? What? Oh, and we're not connected. I got the password for this one.
Oh, awesome.
Whoops, not that one. Actually, it's Think Inc., capital T, capital I. If you do that while I share, I'm going to reveal that we're about to see is that next month, the 4th Thursday of February, which I think is February 22nd, Katie Gengler is going to be our speaker. She's going to be talking about Ember 3.0, what you need to know. The spoiler is nothing changed in Ember 3.0, but a lot has changed since Ember 2.0. And so she's going to talk about how to think about that with your apps, how to move forward. We have room for lightning talks for next month, so talk to me tonight or during the month if you have something that you'd like to present. And RSVPs are open for that. We're going to be back here, 99%. Michael's confirming. We're going to be back here next month for that event. In addition to your Ember NYC events, there is another event coming up. Anybody have their travel arrangements done for EmberConf? Show of hands. Some good folks. All right, awesome. I'm excited to go back to Portland. Tickets are on sale. Flights are reasonable right now. Definitely check out Alaska Airlines out of Newark to Portland if you.
Alaska Airlines is a nice one.
Yeah, not bad.
Very folksy.
Yeah.
Folksy stuff.
And if you have not been to EmberConf before, it's an awesome conference. Portland is a great town for eating, drinking, and you should check it out. So I want to also say thank you to our sponsors tonight, most importantly, Movable Ink, where we are. For those of you who don't know Movable Ink, Lee, what is the elevator pitch? What's the elevator? What the elevator pitch for Movable Ink?
Personalized email for enterprise marketers. So one email template looks different for millions of people as they open it.
Awesome.
Also, if you'd like a glass of beer, we fixed the case.
Woo! So they have beer and a great product with lots of customers. So and a lot of it's in Ember, and they're probably hiring because they had to fill up this floor. So let them know if you're looking for work and want to work with a great team. And in all seriousness, I've worked with Lee in the past before. I've worked with Michael in the past, and they're fantastic folks. So thank you to them for hosting. And with that, I want to open up the floor to any announcements from you guys. Come on up, grab the mic.
Hello everyone, I'm Ollie Griffiths. I'm going to be I'm going to be doing a workshop at EmberConf on Broccoli.js. So if you've ever heard the name and ever experienced some of the pain, maybe with that, come along, learn some stuff. It's going to be great. That's it. But come to EmberConf even if you don't want to come and see my thing.
Awesome. Come on up.
Just to follow that up, I'm Sam, and with Ryan, my partner, my business partner, we're doing 2 trainings at EmberConf. We're doing one on Advanced Mirage, and we're doing another one on Functional CSS. So those are both on Monday, I guess, the week of EmberConf. So yeah, if you're interested, talk to me about it here, and yeah, hope to see you in Portland.
On that topic, slightly related, I'm organizing a secret dinner at EmberConf. It'd be a vegan outing to a Portland vegan establishment. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know and I'll get you on the secret list. Awesome. So our first speaker tonight to talk to us about the Ember Community Survey, please help me welcome Ezer.
Thanks, Luke. So I'm Isaac. Got married in October in London. It's me and my wife, Emma. Thank you very much. There's Corey. I don't know if you guys noticed. Corey was there. Yeah. Hello, Olivia. Oh, and incidentally, Corey's getting married tomorrow. So everyone wish Corey a congratulations on Twitter tomorrow. So I work at 201 Created, which some of you may have heard of or worked with. We're a consulting company in New York. We are hiring, and we also have some availability in the next few months. So if you need some help with your Ember apps, let us know. If you want to maybe come work with us and do some consulting, feel free to let us know as well. Currently, there's 5 of us. This is our team. Corey, Matt are the founders. I've appeared here in New York a lot, and there's currently 5 of us. So every year around EmberConf, we run an Ember community survey. Don't look at this yet if you're on your own computers, because we're going to do a little thing in a minute. But put your hands up if you filled out the survey last year or in the past. All right, yeah, about half the people. So there's a really good chance to kind of learn about the community, what versions of Ember people are using, what things they're excited about, what some of the pain points are. It really gives us a sense what kind of companies are using Ember. So we are going to do it again. We always announce the results at EmberConf. So I just want to encourage you. It's not live online yet. We'll probably open it up for about 2 weeks starting in mid-February. So I just want to start reminding everybody, please fill it out. Watch out on Twitter and on the Ember.js blog. We'll be announcing it. I really encourage you all to fill it out. Tell your friends. If you work in a big organization or a small one that uses Ember, either way, encourage your colleagues to fill it out, please. And we're also we're open to feedback on what questions maybe we should be asking that we haven't been asking in the past, or shouldn't be asking that we were asking in the past. So we're also going to be posting on Twitter and maybe on Ember that here's the draft and please give us feedback. So if you're thinking, I'm dying to know like what kind of, are big companies using Ember or small companies, what kind of add-ons are popular, whatever question you could think of that you think we should be asking, please let us know, because we love that feedback. So to recap the survey, I thought I would do something fun, and we're going to play a little game. Does everyone know Family Feud? Yeah, So we're going to do Ember Family Feud. So I'm going to split the room up in 2 halves, so we'll have some kind of teams. Let's do everyone on the tall tables and maybe this first table here in the front, and then let's do this side of the room will be team 2. So we'll kind of alternate each question, and we'll see who wins. So maybe we'll start with team 1. So we asked in the survey what version of Ember are used in your apps. And at the time, I think when we started the survey, 2.11 was the newest. And with about a week left in the survey, we actually released 2.12. So let's start hearing some guesses. Whoa, how did I already get that there? Never mind. Hold on, let's refresh. Let's refresh and give it away. Do I have a guess from the first team? 2.11. Yes, congratulations. Do I have another guess? 3 strikes and I'll move this way. Another version that was popular. These are the top 6 versions. There were others that were in less use.
Version 1.
No, that is incorrect. That is 1 strike. Can I have another guess? You got 2 more tries. We're going to fill out all 6 of these before we move on. Any more chance for another guess? You got 3 strikes. We know there have been versions. Well, Ember started on 1 and went up to 1.13. Then went 2, 2.11. There were 2.12. There were LTSs. Let's say your guess. Team number 1. 2 is not an answer. Okay, let's award you your first points, and let's go over to team number 2. Do we have some guesses?
113.
113 is correct. That was number 5.
2.8.
2.8 did figure in. It was an LTS, and that's number 3. Excellent. Any other guesses? 2.4 LTS was the 6. You guys are killing it. Do we have another guess?
112.
112 is not in the top 6. 210 did figure. It was actually the second most popular at the time. And the 4th one?
2.9.
One more guess. 212 is correct. So I anecdotally suspect that many people were waiting. They were on that 212 beta and they knew they could get it out, and they were waiting to fill out the survey until they could actually launch so they could say, yes, our app is on 212. So it happened. So far, Team 2 is in the lead. Let's go to the next question. We got 5 of these. So we asked, what is the primary language of your server-side stack? And we got the top 5 responses. Do we have a guess from Team 2? Ruby is correct, number 1. Do we have another guess? JavaScript is number 2. PHP was number 5. Well done. You guys are killing it. Python was number 4. Node is not here. Now, Node is a framework, not a language. So JavaScript is correct. There was another question about frameworks, and I'm sure Node was pretty high up there. Go is also wrong. Java is correct. I'm going to give it to this team because I think he had all your strikes. So I'm going to award Team 2. And then I'm going to give Java was the number 3. I'm going to award that to Team number 1. Good job, guys. It's not an Ember app. I wish I could take credit for this, but someone else built it and I just tweaked it and it's amazing. So you could go through the fork and find out who it is. Does everyone know the rules of Price is Right? So you have to guess a number without going over, right? So let's do a quick special round of Price is Right. So who can guess? Another language that was further down the stack was Elixir/Erlang. Who can guess? Let's see who can get the highest percentage without going over. Let's just yell out some guesses.
7.
Okay.
Wait, this is the percentage
Who said
of
that?
total responses?
Yes. Percentage of people who said they use Elixir and Erlang is on the stack.
I'll go 8.
Okay. Anyone else? 6. 4.
13.
13.
18.1.
18.1. I'll take 2 more. 1884. 1 more.
1%.
Amazingly, the first answer was correct. It was 8%, so you're the closest without going over. Is that the rule? Or I guess the person who got it exact would win. So whoever said 8 would win. Give it up for that person. All right. We asked, what is your preferred text editor? And we had 6, so what do people think? I think it's Team 1's turn to start this time. Vim was on there. It was number 3. VS Code was there as well, trending. The year before it did not figure at all in the survey. Well done. Sublime, number 2. Atom is number 1. You guys are killing it. Believe it or not, yeah. What's wrong with Atom? Emacs, yes, thank you. Number 6, my editor of choice. Thank you very much. And we have one more, which probably nobody's going to guess, huh? Good guess, but that is wrong. But that was my Price is Right question, so let's do a quick Price is Right round for the whole room. Notepad++, what was the percentage? Okay, we got 1. 5, take 3 more. 25, okay. 0. The answer was 2%. All right, so let's get this 5th one. I don't think anyone's going to get it.
Wait, text wrangler.
No. Huh? Yes, WebStorm, yes. Well done. I don't even know what that is. 4%. But there's some heavy hitters using Emacs. Robert Jackson. What's the name of the liquid fire guy? Yeah, Ed Faulkner, yeah. Shit, you're not recording this, are you? Okay, so we asked, this part is a bit cool. I don't know if you remember, but we had an intern named Tom Zellman from the Detroit area who does a lot of stuff with natural language processing. So what we did is we had a few free-form questions in the survey, and we did some textual analysis. So we asked people things like, how likely are you to recommend Ember to one of your colleagues? And then we asked things like, what's your favorite part of Ember, and what can you improve? And then we kind of correlated, like, does anyone know what a net promoter score is? Raise your hand if you do. Basically, it's a way of calculating, like, does someone kind of recommend Ember or not recommend Ember? So we segmented the audience, and we kind of looked at what were terms that were popular. So for this one, this is kind of a free form, but we asked, how can we improve Ember? And we have a top 6 terms here. So I'm going to start with Team 2. Let's hear some guesses.
Smaller. Make it small.
Something else?
Bundle size.
I'm going to say no.
Simple though.
You can dispute, but I'm going to say no. But there's an interesting term related that came up. Other guesses?
Speed.
Performance, yeah. Performance is number 4. Well done.
Less shitty.
No, I'm going to say wrong. Marketing, yes, was the 5th. Well done. Documentation was number 1, yes.
More modular.
No, I'm going to say no. We're going to switch to the other team.
Become React.
To the other team. Sorry?
Become React.
No. But oh, you are on that team. Any other guesses?
Ease of onboarding.
This is the hard one. This is the hard one. One more guess from the whole team. Let's have the whole team.
Cryptocurrency.
No, okay. Okay, number 2 was Ember Data. Tree shaking. Who said that? That was number 6, believe it or not. And number 3 was routable components.
To be fair, this was before Yehuda said.
Yes. So this one was a bit random, but we said, which of the following topics would you feel comfortable explaining to a colleague? Let's start with this team. Components, yes. Can we be a bit more specific? There were a few different things around components that came up.
Data down.
No, I'm going to say no. This one's hard. Sorry? Bitcoin? No, I'm not going to take that. Yes, that's there, isn't it? Component life cycles number 4. Well done. Other guesses?
Personal hygiene.
Personal hygiene is wrong. Any other guesses?
Services.
No. All right, I'm just going to run through the answers. The one that most people said they were comfortable to explain was routing and the router. Number 2 was promises. Number 3, because nobody seems to understand them. Number 3 was composition with components. So, okay, you said components.
Just don't add up to 100.
They don't, you're right, but people check more than one thing, so you're right. Number 5 was using the Ember data store. Right. Number 6, JavaScript modules, import, export, etc. Number 7, writing basic tests. No? Tough crowd, tough crowd. Number 8 was debugging. Who believes it? Who believes it? All right, this is the last question. Is everyone having fun?
Yes.
All right. This is the last question. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier. So we segmented responders into detractors, passives, and promoters, and performed similarity analysis on the freeform text responses. What were the top terms for promoters?
Wait. What was the question?
What were the top? So
The top terms in what question?
the top terms in a freeform text response, where people said what did they like about Ember, and also what did they like about Ember? The people who promoted it, what were the things? Stability is not okay. Conventions is there, number 3. Community, number 1. Add-ons, not an answer we got. Ember CLI, yes, number 2. Wow, this is a impressive group. You guys, everyone memorized the survey results for last time. Amazing. One more, number 4. Wish it was, but it wasn't.
Productivity. Happiness.
Close, I'll take it. I love it. So that concludes the game. Thank you very much for playing, everybody. Please, just watch online, weigh in with comments on the questions. Let's make the survey even better, learn a lot about the community, and fill it out once we open it up. Thanks. Sorry? Oh yeah, good question. Oh my God, look how close it was. Wow, what? Good job. I'm very impressed.
Which team is the one that won?
This is team 2. Yeah, give it up for team 2. You can still apply. I should take this off. I have stickers for the winning team. If you want a sticker, let me know.
All right.
And I have constellation stickers for the losing team as well.
So our next lightning talk is too hot to handle. It's so hot that I was wondering if somebody was going to ask that. It's so hot that we're going to turn the camera off for this one. So we can have an unvarnished look at this demo. Please help me welcome. All right, everybody, we're going to get started again. Our next speakers are among the most thoughtful folks that I know in the Ember community. They have a new podcast if you haven't checked it out yet. It's a very good listen and their thoughtfulness is on display in podcast. But by thoughtful, I mean really thinking about the development process, the day-to-day experience of working with Ember, and how we can make it better. And so tonight they're going to bring that thoughtfulness to the topic of Ember data. So please help me welcome Ryan and Sam.
Thanks, Luke. Evening, everyone. So I'm Sam Selikoff. This is Ryan, and we run a company called Ember. We blog and we podcast and we make videos teaching Ember concepts. We've been doing that for about a year now, and that came from our work working together at TED and other companies where we're basically end up in positions where we get to see how people use these tools. And so we started the company partly to educate and partly to help us do some open source as well to try to improve the tools that we see people use. And so, this is talk about Ember data, and I kind of want it to be a conversation. We're going to code a little bit, and want to hear as much feedback about this stuff as possible because we've been thinking about it for a while, and we want to see if kind of where our thinking is right now resonates with y'all. So, we love Ember data. We think it's a really important part of Ember's architecture. And we think basically every Ember app we've come to see, like, we think everyone should be using Ember data. There's parts that Ember data don't fit into sometimes, but overall it's like we think Ember data has the right idea in terms of the abstraction level it's trying to create. And so having a single way to load and access data in an Ember app, we think is really important. So even though Ember data is not I wouldn't call it a complete data solution today, we still love it, and we think it should be basically part of every Ember app. It's powerful, it's flexible, but maybe it's too flexible. So Ember data has been around for a while, and it was created in a time when APIs were much less standard, much less constrained than they are today. So today we have JSON API, which is it's a learning from years of building APIs for front ends. And it has constraints, it has features like includes, and Ember data, again, was created before that existed. And so if you work in a modern kind of stack today, the way you load data should be pretty, again, constrained and standard. The way you can load data using Ember data is very varied. There's lots of ways you can go about doing it. So that's kind of one of the things we hope to address with the add-on. Many ways to load data, and it means that bugs are not always easy to diagnose. So, when you start out a new app and you just call store.find dollar, store.find record, and you can see where the data is coming from and how it's showing up, that's one thing. I think what happens is you get in a situation where your app starts growing, and every time you add a new route to your app, you've now added like 3 new ways to get to the old route. And so you start multiplying the amount of transitions between states in your application. And someone who coded one part of the app thinking that the only way you get there was through this one route now has 5 ways to get there. And so these are some of the symptoms from the way that you can load data in kind of this inconsistent way. So some of the common problems are missing or incomplete data. This can kind of materialize in different ways. In routes, like I was just saying, you can end up in a route and not have all the data you thought you did because you got there a different way than you originally intended. Components can be rendered with incomplete data. Some other symptoms are flashing templates or a flash of unstyled content. I guess flash of unstyled content is kind of a term borrowed from like CSS or fonts loaded lazily after the initial render, but I think it also kind of applies just the idea of the page doesn't really act the way you thought it did or the way you intended it when you wrote it. You develop a page, let's say you write a template thinking you're going to have all the data marshaled at the time of render, thinking all the fonts and everything's going to be loaded, and the user going to click a button, and they're going to get a render, and they're going to see kind of one thing. And what happens sometimes in Ember apps that use Ember data is data can get loaded at different times that you didn't expect. And so does that kind of resonate, where you kind of, sometimes you click maybe in a list and like there's one item that appears and a bunch of stuff happens and you didn't really expect it. So that's kind of what I mean by this. And then you can have excessive network requests due to like an N+1 query bug in template. So these are some of the common problems, and the question is, why should we be solving these ourselves? Like if I see a lot of people nodding their heads, and if this is, we're all about conventions with Ember, so we want to kind of have a common solution to this. So that's what Ember Data Storefront is about. It's just a collection of APIs that address these common problems. So what we're going to do is work through some bugs. And I have just a sample app here. And let me show it to you. So it's just like a CMS application. It's, it has some routes, has some blog posts. You can click on these blog posts, see the detail page. You can edit posts. You can edit tags. You can view the tags. Just kind of typical stuff. And basically, we'll just use this as kind of a sandbox to play around with. So let's look at the first bug, which so I thought I was going to have a mirror, but then it didn't work out with the live coding. So the first bug I'm going to show you is this. So I just kind of showed you how this works, right? So I'm here looking at this list of posts. We click on a post, we can see it. That's pretty much as expected. So what if we start on this post, and what if we reload the page, and then we click blog posts?
Did anyone see? Did anyone see what happened there?
So let me do it again. So we're on the blog post page. Click blog posts.
Oh, the first one's still there, and then it fetches the rest.
Yeah, so that it loads with one post, then we fetch the rest, and they all come in.
Classic. So that's what we were hoping to hear.
There's this. So we introduced a state in our app that we didn't code for this. We never said like we want to show one post. So now we have this state. What do we do when we're showing one post? So folks that are familiar with this, how have you fixed it?
So just to show that again, we have a blog post here, and then we click on the index route. It renders immediately with the one post that we have loaded, that we started with, and then the rest of it flashes in.
Is that because you're calling find all?
Because you're calling find all?
I usually use queries for this because that's one reason, and also there's usually some way I want to filter the data. I usually don't really want all the data. At least apps I've been working on recently where I've had some of these. So using queries and reload. I guess reload true is another way.
Okay, reload true. So if we did, so let's do reload true. So let's look at the route for post index. So this is called the post index route. This is called the post route. And here's the model hook. So it's just kind of standard find all, and we include the tags. And so, right, what Isaac is saying is correct. Basically, if we look at the post route right here, we have, and we can just remove this for now, or I'll just leave that there. So what we do is the bug happens when we start on this route, we load the post of one, let's say, then we go here, and this code gets run. And it runs find all. And the way find all behaves is if there's any model of that type in Ember Data Store, find all will return immediately with it. So it will synchronously return. And then so what happens why do the new posts show up?
It returns a live record array that gets dynamically updated as it fires off an AJAX request in the background, and when that returns, it updates that live record array.
Right.
And it reloads.
Exactly. So he said it returns a live bound array, and in the background it reloads. So there's an API called should background reload all, and that determines, that's on the adapter level, and that determines whether new data is, basically Ember Data is saying, here I have one post, so I'll give that to you right away, and I'm just going to make a new query to the back end in case there's any new data. right? And so that was kind of the intent of background reload, but you can see in this situation, it's not really fulfilling the intent. Really, it's not what we want to have happen here. So, so let's put reload true on our route. And then let's try this again. So we'll start with our app on post 1, and then we'll go back to blog posts. Okay, so we can see it blocked, and it didn't render until then. Okay, so what do you guys think about this solution?
Well, the downside is that every time you come back to this page, you're going to be waiting for this query, even if you do have everything.
Exactly. So basically, if reload is true, then you're always reloading, and now you've basically lost the benefits of Ember Data's cache, right? Because one of the benefits of using Ember in the first place is that if you already have data loaded, you should be able to render synchronously. So, okay, so what's another solution? Have you all encountered this in your own apps before and coded around this? So what do you do?
If you have good caching headers on the request, then at least you'll get a 304 not modified.
That's a good
Take the
answer.
pro-
So you can
have
move the caching to the network
like a
layer.
CDN or something. Or your own server.
So what might we do in the Ember app?
I've sometimes made it a service that kind of intermediates my access to this, where I can keep track of whether I did the all request or not. I don't know if that's a good pattern, but I've done that before.
Yeah, so that's what we
that's what we-
that's what we do end up doing a lot. Do you want to?
Yeah, so if you go back to the code, one of the things we do, reload true, we'll make reload a variable. So we'll say, set it as should reload.
And then
Reload. Well, you said is reload, do reload colon should reload, and then we'll set on line 6. We'll set should reload to just some local property on the route. So this dot get.
So we can start with. Let's just say should reload is false. Is that how we did this?
Yeah.
Should reload is true. And then reload, we just get this like this. So this is just an example of what you can do. And then what you can do is in, let's say, after model. Well, if we've gotten to after model, we know we've run the model hook before, right? So we can set it to false. And now we don't have reload as a variable, and so if we start here, we click here, we get the nice render. It's only once. And then if we go back to page and then back to blog posts, now that was instant. As soon as we click that happened instantly, right? So this works, but it's kind of like we had this beautiful model hook, right? We had this model hook that looked like this, which is like very conventional Ember, and then we ended up with all this extra stuff just to deal with this caching. So what's really going on here? Like, what's the real problem with this code, or why is this happening? And I think one way to think about why this is happening is to look at something like, a handlebars template. If we look at a handlebars template, this is just some variable, and counter is a variable, and we as Ember developers know if we render this, no matter how counter changes, we know it's going to work. Like, counter is never going to not be what the variable is. And as Ember developers, we have that guarantee, right? Like, no matter how you get to this template, no matter how counter changes, if it's being incremented, no matter what happens, whatever happens to get it from one state to another, we have a guarantee from Glimmer and from handlebars that this is going to be correct. So what on the right makes that gives us that guarantee that we don't have on the left? What about the nature of the code? Asynchronous?
It's declarative versus imperative.
It's declarative versus imperative, so tell me more.
On the right, you're just saying, counter goes here, I don't care how you do it, but put counter there. On the left, you're saying, sending a specific message to the store to do this thing right now.
That's great. That's great. So basically, like, we know some of the benefits. We hear a lot about the benefits of declarative programming, and we know that when we keep our code, whether it's a template or if it's code in functions declarative, we have a declarative layer, just like SQL is declarative, right? Select star from users is declarative. The declarative layer on the outside gives the tools on the inside opportunity to do something with the implementation. And when it goes from one state to the next, if you just have a declaration of what the state is, then the tooling can take the hard parts away from that state transition and do it for us. So just like Glimmer is taking the hard parts of manipulating the DOM and keeping it up to date when we change handlebars variable from one state to the next, so too should we be able to declare the data needs of a route and have the tooling take care of fetching it or looking it up in a cache or whatever. So the idea that we want to push tonight is basically there's parts of our Ember apps that are declarative and there's parts that aren't, and if we can do things that make more of the imperative parts declarative, then you're going to avoid a lot of these common data loading issues.
Can you go back to like the should reload? Yeah. So the imperativeness comes from line 10, saying that we should reload, because we're no longer describing the data that our template needs. We're describing the data the template needs and how to fetch it and when to fetch it. And this is where we lose that declarativeness.
Right. So really, if you think about how would we declare what data we need for this route? Like, if you're coding this template and you're like, okay, what's the data I need to be marshaled for this thing to render once and one time only, right? It's something like all of the posts that I know about in the system, right? So, and also their tags as well. But that doesn't fully describe it because, again, we have this notion of have we hit the network yet, or do we have all the posts in loaded, right? And they can change, and sometimes you might want to like reload them after 5 minutes or something like that, right? But there is this idea of saying, when the developer first opened this route and coded this, and they were like, yeah, I need all the posts and I need to include the tags. Their mental model is thinking, okay, this is the data requirements for this route, this is what I need, so this is what I expect I'm going to have when I go to code that template. The problem is that Ember data, the semantics of find all don't match that model that they have in their head. And so because find all can return whatever happens to be in the store, even if it's never gone to the server and made a full request, then that's where we get the two states from. Does anyone have any questions about that?
I have a completely orthogonal solution to this that I think is actually quite elegant.
Okay.
And doesn't go into all this.
Okay.
All right, bear with me. So it sounds like the real problem here, when you're looking at that page, is that you have one thing appearing, promise resolves, and you have a whole bunch of other stuff appearing, right? What if we use Ember concurrency and we leverage the property that it exposes as the promise is in the process of being fulfilled, and we actually put that into a class, and then we did some CSS magic on there so that when the promise is running, we just don't show it. When the promise resolves, we just change that class, it is fulfilled, and then now we just show that thing. Like that way, you can still use all the normal cool parts of Ember. You leverage like some style.
You don't know the promise is running because when you do that, you get back a record array, which is not a promise. And inside to Ember data, it's fired off a request. When that resolves, it dynamically updates that array that was returned from that final call. So it's like all internal.
Exactly. So the problem is that if you have a post in the store and you return store.findAllPost, the promise resolves immediately. In the background, there's a promise that's kicked off. But the thing that returned is going to call resolve immediately, so that even the Ember concurrency's tasks state would be is idle. So again, the problem here is the developer coding this is saying this template exists in one state, right? We could add a loading template if we wanted to show something when that initial request was going out, but the idea is it only exists in one state. So what we really want is we want a declarative way to do what we just coded, right? Which is reload is true the very first time we do find all, and then after that reload should be false. Another way to say that is that find all should be query aware. It should be aware of the queries it's run against the server and it hasn't run. And this is Storefront solution. So Storefront gives you a new API on store called loadAll, which is the analogy to findAll. And so if we change store.findAll to store.loadAll and refresh, so now if we start off on this post and we click blog posts, we see it blocks. We don't get the extra state. And then if we go back there, and then as soon as we click this, we get the immediate. So now we have the cache.
But are you monkey patching the store?
No, it's a mixin. So
So we've gone back and forth on this a few times. So we made a service called Storefront that we put these APIs on, but then we had some components that was like inject service Storefront, inject service store, and we thought that was a little repetitive.
Initially, we thought Storefront would be a separate service that you use completely separately instead of store. But the thing is, there's a lot of the store's APIs that we don't think need changing at all. Peek all, create record, save, destroy, destroy record. It's really just the querying side for the store. So another thing I want to mention is like Storefront is not. We want to put the ideas in Storefront out there and get people using them because we think if what we're saying is true and people agree with it, it should be the default behavior in Ember data. And so the idea here would be kick the tires on these ideas, and if they're successful, RFC process to Ember data. So I guess to answer your question, we are monkey patching store, but we're okay with that. Right, so that's how, so basically this is kind of the introduction to one of the main APIs in Storefront, which is you have load all and load record, just like find all and find record, but they're aware of your query. And the first time you run it, it's going to hit the server. After that, it resolves from the cache. That alone solves many problems. And we're going to see some more that it solves soon. So let's go back to the presentation really quick. So we call this bug one. We call this the, oh, we got plenty of time. For some reason, I thought we did. This is bug one. It's called the find all and background reload bug, right? And we saw that find all resolve. The problem is that find all resolves synchronously with whatever's in your store, even if find all has never been called against the network before. And the solution is just to replace it with load all. All right, next bug. Let's go here. Now, if we start on the blog posts and we click top 10 JavaScript libraries to learn, you see a little bit of flashing content. So let me do it one more time. So if I'm on the blog post, I click blog posts, that's fine. I go here, that's all loaded. But if the first time we do it, we click this, there's a little flash at the bottom. The activity and the comments are not loaded. So this template is rendered, and those pop into view. So who can tell me, who thinks they know what's going on here?
Is this necessarily a problem?
What's that?
Is this necessarily a problem?
Is this necessarily a problem? That's a great question. Does anyone have any thoughts? Depends on your product.
I would say it's better to be able to start reading the blog post than to have to wait to read it while that other stuff loads.
I concur with the gentleman from New York.
Well, question. What happens if you just hit that URL now? So is it a behavior difference between that? So that's the problem.
Great point. So the developer who coded this template obviously didn't intend that behavior, let's say.
So I'm going to guess that this is side-loading include data, which you are getting when you're getting the main request, but when you're getting the find all, you're not including all the activity and the comments in that main response. So you're side-loading this additional data in asynchronously once the main data is loaded.
So did everyone hear what he said? He said, you're side-loading the data. Well, let's pull up in the route and see. So we've got the index route here, which gets posts and includes tags. And then the post detail route, let's open both of these. The post detail route has comments, tags, and activities. And right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what would you do to fix this?
I mean, the brute force attempt is if you don't have that stuff loaded, then you spin her until it is.
spinner.
Yeah, you know, some form of loading thing, but that's not better.
But that template renders immediately as soon as we click it, right? So how would you spinner?
Maybe you need the same reload flag on the find record.
Okay, let's try that.
Like, do you have a load record in Storefront?
Maybe.
Maybe. How did I get?
Okay, so yeah, reload true does it, but again, we have the same problem. So this is the same thing. Basically, Ember Data's find record has the same semantic behavior. Do you want me to start that? Yeah. Ember Data's find record has the same semantics as find all, which is if you're saying find record post ID 1, no matter what you're trying to include along with it, if we have post 1 in the store, then return it immediately and then reload it in the background. So that's what's happening here. The background reload is what's pulling in the rest of the included data.
This is also, I think this is a good example of something that before JSON API, we didn't use these include statements in our apps. And so this was never really a problem. Once we got to JSON API and we started side-loading data, this became more of a problem because it's find all generally just loads the records and then we get all the data we need to render that page inside the route with the include.
If those things have been loaded for that record, it's still going to cause a reload, even though we don't actually need it to.
It's going to do a background reload,
Right.
but the initial render of that screen has all the data, so when the data comes back in the background, if nothing's changed, the user will never know.
There's no concept in Ember Data of like, this is a complete.
So you actually, so the thing is that whether it background reloads or not, is it asks the adapter. There's a method on the adapter called should background reload record and should background reload all. So what you can do is return false to those, let's say, and then you wouldn't have an unnecessary AJAX request. The unnecessary AJAX request is maybe a problem. To me, the bigger problem is that the fact that your app exists in 2 states when you didn't intend it. And so back to Gaurav's point is that, okay, is it a problem? You got like the primary data and your secondary data is kind of popping in lazily. And in this situation, I think, okay, you can make an argument that it's fine. Like I think if you were sitting next to a non-tech, a product person, and you have routes that behave differently based on whether you click on them or you navigate to them. Again, in this is like, I think the least egregious case of this, right? This is like the least severe symptom of this kind of thing. But I'm sure, can you guys think of times in your apps where this behavior is causing all sorts of rearranging content, or even, if statement is flipping because it's not true or false until the data is loaded. Again, the bigger problem here is like, we know state is our biggest enemy when it comes to programming. And it's a nice mental model to be able to say, when we get to the declarative templating part, to say we have all the data that we need, and this is exactly what it's going to do. If we introduce asynchronicity into parts of our route or controller that then affect our template, and now our template can exist in 2 or 3 or 4 states when we only thought it could only ever exist in this one, this is a big source of bugs.
Would it be possible, like down the line in the future in data land maybe, that includes statement is introspective to determine whether or not it actually needs to do a reload?
I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, great.
Especially when you get down to fields with the fields property.
Right, so for those who don't know, sparse field sets, you can say, maybe on this index page, we only need the title of the blog post and the published at, but on the detail page, maybe you're looking at like an inventory and the whole record is like, I don't know if you ever worked on a consulting project where they had a database table with 100 columns in it. You don't want to load all 100 columns for every record in the index page, so you only load a few fields and then you load the full thing.
When has anyone had to ever do like a has fully loaded property on their model? So that's what I do in that situation.
Yep. So then, right. So, but again, this gets back to the idea. So what you were just saying actually is we're starting to build this, and I think Storefront has some support for this at the record level. So again, the way we would solve this with Storefront is the same thing. We would say, instead of reload true, we would say store.load record. And now if we start on this post and we go here, we see that we only get the one state. And again, if you wanted to add feedback, you could use a loading route. Or if you wanted to load that secondary data, you could do that. you could do that in a Ember concurrency task that you kick off on the controller once you enter it, let's say. Let's say instead of
Do it in
controller.
after model.
Or an after model, right? I think our point is that if you're going to build that UI, we want you to build it deliberately and not have it be a side effect of how Ember happens to render your application. So it should be something that you've thought through as a UX, as a UI that you've thought through and you're building it so that it behaves predictably according to how you developed it. Okay, so let me just show this working really quick. So this just like before, we click here and now we get the pause. And again, that's blocking every time so that we could use Ember's loading substate. But then when we go back and forward, we get a sync render the second time because it's just going to return it immediately.
Can you go back to the code? One nice thing about load record is we track what relationships have been loaded. So if you do load in another route, you load posts with comments, another route posts with tags, and a third route posts with activities. We won't run this query. We know it has all the data that is loaded. Yeah, so this is what we talk about when we say like Storefront is query aware. It knows what queries we've run, and JSON API makes this really easy because there's only so many queries that, includes is very specific, so we know to split by the comma, check the relationships. Yeah, so.
Any questions about this?
If we're not using JSON API, would we notice these problems or even have them?
Yes. I mean, it all depends how you build your backend. You can always side load every like index find all request side loads all the related data. That makes your payloads larger, slower.
It also makes the index page have knowledge about how the detail pages look, and if those change and you don't change the index page, you'll have this problems as well.
Yeah. So I don't think these problems are JSON API specific. I think we start to notice them because JSON API causes us to use includes a lot more in our routes. So I think when we started writing our Ember apps in JSON API, these became much more apparent, but they were always there.
So just to recap the second bug, find all, define record. So it's the same idea. It resolves synchronously even though its includes aren't loaded. And load record is query aware. All right. So, and guesses on what the third bug is going to be? Don't read that. I have to remind myself. So let's start on the blog post page. And then we click on the post. Okay. So we know that the post has activity and comments, but it's not there. Now if we start on this page, we see all the data. But from here, it's not loading. Now if I go back and forward, there's the data. I'm kind of cheating a little bit here, maybe, but I think this is a possible app you might encounter. So I click on the link. There's no activity comments. I click here.
Oh, you're passing the model in the link too?
So now when I use back and forward, I have a different behavior. So Barb said you're passing the model in link to. So let's check it out. We'll go to the index template. We'll go down to the table, each post, link to post. And then, so what happens when you pass a model in link to?
Model hook, yeah.
So we got the model hook here. It gets all of this stuff and included, but because we passed the model, we don't do it. So what's the solution here?
That's the ID instead of the full model.
So if we pass the ID, we start on the blog post page, we click this, and then we get the behavior we want. So this one's a little trickier, but I think it goes back to the same root point that Luke pointed out, which is there's a problem, and the problem is that this is doing a pretty good job of declaring our data needs for our route, but we now have two ways to get to a new state. So this is state one. Our app is in two states, let's say. It's just considered the two states. State one is the index page, and then state 2 is this page. And thinking back to the handlebars example, when we have a declarative template that can exist in 2 states, ideally we're not responsible for transitioning, how to get between them. Because we're able to keep that completely declarative, Glimmer is able to take care of the dirty work of transitioning what needs to happen, what needs to change in order to arrive at the new state. And so if we could do the same in data loading, we have state 1, we've declared what it needs, state 2, it declares what it needs, and however we get from state 1 to state 2, it's the same thing, and the tooling takes care of the fetching. So the problem is here, there's 2 ways to get from state 1 to state 2, and we've coded 2 different ways. One is basically like calling a method, passing an object in as the model. Another is using the history back and forward, which has different behavior. So again, this just bringing it back to think what the root cause of all these problems are and how we can avoid them, right? So this bug, yeah, this is the linking by model. And what do you guys think are some ways we could, what are some patterns or behaviors that could alleviate these bugs that come from this?
Well, I mentioned this in the GitHub issue about all this on Ember. You could move the side loading to the after model, so that all the including, so that you get the initial model in model, and then you get all the rest of the stuff in after model.
Does
Okay.
after model run in this case?
Huh?
Does after model run?
I think
Yeah.
after model always runs, right?
After model
After
always
model runs.
But you are adding a round trip, a network round trip in a case where
It
you
depends on
visit
whether
that one
you're
directly.
using, it depends on whether you're using embedded records mixing, but yes. In some cases we are.
But when you reload the route for the first time, you still have to go through model, and then you have to go through after model, right?
Right.
So
After model won't fire until you've gotten the whole model in.
Right.
The problem has to resolve.
Doesn't link to give a
Yeah,
warning
but
if you
it's,
pass a model these days?
does it really?
I thought I saw that somewhere.
Does it what?
That's
No.
a proposal.
Link to, oh, there's a proposal to make link to throw a warning if you pass it a model. Is that an idea?
Interesting.
That's
Also,
interesting.
I like how this presentation turned into like the worst mistakes I've ever made in the last 5 years. This is like those nightmares of like reliving their worst time.
That's why we started with the big heart emoji. We love Ember data.
This is very embarrassing.
Tom, if these are the worst mistakes, you did a pretty good job.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Here.
So there's a proposal to do that?
I have an RFC to always run the model hook.
Oh,
There
sweet.
is no
Yeah.
Love it.
So thinking
Yeah,
about,
I would support
yeah,
IRC.
so thinking about one possible solution of always running the model hook, and how that fits into this notion that the more of our code we get declarative, the more the tooling can take care of it for us, and the less we have to worry about. So, actually against what Tom is saying, I think, but until we had something like Ember data to help us isolate our code and the idea that we can open our app and see state 1, state 2, and understand there's a transition, as opposed to when we were just writing, spaghetti JavaScript code 5-10 years ago. Like us being on that higher floor is allowing us to see, oh wow, the templates are really the right pattern because the rendering engine has been rewritten 3 times and my handlebars templates haven't changed at all. That is a testament to the power of declarative programming, because just like SQL could change its entire implementation, but as long as you select star from users, it gets faster and faster because you're not concerning your code with the how, right, of how the implementation works. So yes, we could do after model, but again, to me that feels like what I really want is just to say, this is the data needs for my route. Here's the full declaration of what the semantics of what I need. What I'm thinking about when I'm going to code this route, here's what I need to render this state. And that's it, and then the tooling takes care of the rest.
I don't want to derail if you have a little more to say, but I have
We have time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about declarative data loading, right, you have to start talking about GraphQL, right? You just said that. So GraphQL is meant to be a declarative, way to specify what data you want, right? Now the problem is when you start using GraphQL, one, you have to start using a GraphQL server, which has sometimes some surprising things about how expensive a query can be, that kind of thing, right? The other thing is you lose sort of the caching and the identity map that Ember data gives you, right? So those are the two big downsides.
Mhm.
So now that we're talking about being so declarative about,
Data
you know,
loading.
our model hooks, that kind of thing, you know, you could specify in the route, we can make some sort of add-on that consumes a GraphQL query and sort of magically talks with the store and negotiates how to ensure that that whole query is resolved before moving on to rendering.
You're saying because GraphQL lends itself to, I mean, it's basically it's comprised of declarative queries.
Right.
You could imagine a layer where it takes the result of that and pushes identical pieces of records into an identity map, like a store.
We can use it as the data declarative language without actually opting into using a GraphQL API on the back end
Mhm.
and sending those requests over the wire.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting point, and I think that's GraphQL is declarative, and maybe there's some lessons we could learn from its API. I also think that this is declarative, though. What we're looking at right here we're not concerned with how, we're not making AJAX requests, we're not writing imperative AJAX requests here. So I think, again, the point is just thinking, kind of bringing it back to this conversation, the point of Storefront is to say, if the semantics of find all and find record were slightly different, then it enables kind of a fully declarative data fetching model in conventional Ember apps with conventional REST-backed servers. Yeah, that's kind of, I think it's a great point, though. Yeah.
So I have a question about load all.
Mm-hmm.
So with find all, let's say you have one post and then there's a bunch in the database, one in the store.
Mm-hmm.
It'll show you the first, then it'll flash and be out right.
Yep.
So now let's say that you have more than one person making posts.
Yep.
So you're using a client, there's 6 people making posts, and you load all. There used to be 100 posts, but now it's 150.
Mhm.
Right? How does it know?
Yeah, that's a great question.
You wanna
So
repeat it really quick?
yeah, so the question is if we're using load all and we're caching the queries, and then more data gets created on the server and we're just re-rendering these cached queries, then we don't know that more data got rendered on the server. I have a couple ways to answer this. So the first way is what load all does today in our apps is it makes an AJAX request, but it doesn't need to. It could all be driven by WebSockets. Load all could make an AJAX request and then open up a WebSocket channel and have the server pump in new data. The idea about load all isn't like what the implementation is. It's the idea that it's declarative and it tells you what you want. We don't have this in Storefront right now, but we've experimented with sort of, if you have that situation, can you describe your query and say that in 5 minutes from now, I want you to refresh. If 5 minutes go by and you come back into this route, we're going to refetch the data for you. So we've tossed that
Using
idea
something
around.
like expires, right? Because expires also still, if you say that this query expires after 5 minutes, then that's still declarative. You can, and then again, the tooling can say, okay, after 5 minutes, I'm going to start polling, or I'm going to open a WebSocket connection and see if there's events.
You mean look at the header on the response?
We're actually so he's actually talking about at this level. So
At
let's
this level.
say,
So you could have two different.
yeah, let's say you hit load all, and
You have
That'd be cool. That would be cool.
you have like a blog post edit route, and you want that thing to expire immediately because you always want the freshest data. But then you have like a blog post view route, and it's okay to serve old data. But the expires thing we're not.
we were sold on it a week ago, and then after
We talked to Luke, and
They're
not sold on it more.
Right, but
Luke
the
convinced
bigger
us.
idea, I think to your point, the bigger idea is just that. If we all agree on an expressive way to declare our data dependencies for templates, right, for routes, for components, for whatever, if we had a truly expressive way to fully declare all the needs, then the tool gives the tooling much more opportunity to change the implementation underneath. And just like we didn't have to rewrite our templates under 3 rewrites of the Glimmer to Glimmer to Glimmer or whatever. What is it? Handlebars to HTML bars to Glimmer. To Glimmer 2 to Glimmer 2.5. then we wouldn't have to, we don't care. If WebSockets become cheap because Rails adds action cable, then our routes don't have to change, but now they're just fresh, let's say. Right, so this is kind of, again, this is the power of this. So I don't think this limits you from seeing like fresh data in an app. I think it lets you be more deliberate about when things get loaded or how fresh things need to be and so on. So, okay. So let's go on to the next
Sorry,
one.
what was the solution there? Was it just always use IDs and maybe add a link rule?
So, right, okay, so, sorry, I actually have a slide for this.
I see.
So this is bug 3, this is the link by model bug. And so the problem is that our routes model hook doesn't always run, so we don't have one safe place to declare our data needs that we can be guaranteed always will run. So our solution is to try to get as close to that as possible and to declare all the data needs in the model hook, and then use things like Storefront's cache to make it so we don't do unnecessary requests. And then as long as you use IDs every time you link, you'll always run that model hook. And then maybe we can add like an ESLint rule that would look at templates and make sure you're never passing a model hook, something like that, right? So you can imagine different ways that you could enforce this in an application, or if the RFC is accepted and eventually model hook.
In theory, but the problem is, how do you know if something is just a string or?
You look for a .id.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, how would you know? The question is, how would you know if something is a model or a string ID? And yeah, you'd have to look for a .id or.
And in my defense, this decision does predate Ember data even existing. So, because what happened was, you hit the back button, and you see a loading spinner, and you're like, this JavaScript app is way worse than my Rails app because the browser was caching the previous page. But now I hit back and see a loading spinner. There's no Ember data. And if there was Ember data, it has an identity map, so we would use that. But it's kind of like an implicit identity map because at the time, 20K was like a bridge too far of JavaScript. People were very emo about that.
Right.
So
that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
That makes total sense. I think it's totally reasonable. Yeah. Bug 4. So ominous, right?
I mean, you never go past 3. It's like surprising.
Okay, so this is, we have a new model here. So we have blog posts, we have authors. This is a weird model actually because we just did this last minute, but we've got, because the blog post has a reviewer. So we got activities here, we got comments, and now we have an approver or a reviewer. So the idea is you write a blog post and then you can request approval from your reviewer. So your reviewer is Joe, and when I click this, okay, nothing happens. So let's see what's going on here. So it says, yeah. We got some requests, and then it says this.get blah, 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 request approval is not a function. So I'm clicking this and it has an error. So let's see what's going on here. So we are in the post template, post index template, and request approval. Okay, so this is in the template. We hit a request approval, so in the controller, we got a request approval. This.get model, which is a post.reviewer. So if we look at the post, we have a reviewer, and it's getting that reviewer and then calling request approval. So let's look at user, which is what the reviewer relationship points to. So the user has this request approval method. Sorry, I just don't want to wrap it. Request approval method, and it's, right now it's just logging something, but we're getting this error. And if we look at the template, your reviewer is model.reviewer.name. So we're loading the data. If we look at this template, we refresh from the beginning. We've got the post, We've got all this stuff. Your reviewer is Joe, so Joe is there. And yet, we're just doing this simple action. Sorry, this is our first time trying to record the thing, and this shuts off every 25 minutes. So just kind of keeping us on our toes. So does anyone have any idea what's going on here?
Reviewers a promise.
Why is reviewer a promise?
It's an async relationship.
Boom, man, I was hoping there'd be more build up there. So I guess you guys are, right, for those of you who didn't catch that. So reviewer says belongs to, and because it doesn't specify async, it's async true by default. And that means that if you have an instance of post and you say post.getReviewer, you actually have something called a promise proxy. It's either a promise object or a promise array, promise proxy object, promise proxy array, whether it's a has, many, or belongs to. And the idea is that this thing proxies before it's loaded. So even though we've loaded the data, this type is actually not a reviewer instance. It's this promise object. And these promise proxy objects that come from async relationships do a good job in lots of cases of delegating to the methods or the properties you're trying to access. So if you have post.comments and you haven't loaded them yet, and you try to each over them, or you try to map or filter by them using Ember computed composable helpers, or you try to even just try to reduce them in a JavaScript function, all that stuff works. You won't get an error. But that's because they're designed to proxy certain things, and they're not truly an array or an object. They're kind of like one. But in certain situations, that kind of being something like a reviewer but not really a reviewer can leak out into your application. And that's what's happening here. Basically, the proxy object doesn't know how to delegate, or doesn't know how to proxy to request approval.
Can you go back to the controller?
Yes.
So what would you do to fix this?
You could wrap that chunk in a await helper. So you await that reviewer. No, in your template. Why in the template?
Is that a native helper?
No, well, it's something that 510 only has.
Okay.
But
So what would it look like?
he has an add-on that has an await helper, so that you could actually do like await and then add as. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then that particular block won't be rendered until that promise is resolved.
And you would have to pass the reviewer into the action on 43 or no?
Yeah.
So
I mean, that model.reviewer has a property on it to know when it's loaded anyway, because it is a promise proxy.
but the problem is not that it wasn't loaded,
The
right?
problem is that in the controller, you're calling it on an object that isn't the reviewer. So you could do a wait there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then assign that to.
Right, or you could also do dot then.
Yeah, that's right.
Or dot
Await or dot then. So exactly, the template, the waiting in the template was rendered with the data. We saw it, right? It said your reviewer is Joe. So the problem was not that the button was rendered without the reviewer. Problem is that we're calling a method on what we think is a reviewer, but is actually a proxy reviewer. It's something that's like a reviewer, but not really. And so with async relationships, you see this a lot, where you actually have to do this. Right? So, sorry, I'm like, it's the angle. I can't type.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If you passed reviewer as a first parameter on the template and then made it an argument on line 6, would you still have the same problem?
Here, let me do this. Okay, so here, let's save this and let's see if this works. Okay. So so this solution works. This solution works, and what did you say we could do?
So go back to the template. And on line 41, after request approval, make model.reviewer the parameter to the action. Model.reviewer. And then in the controller.
Well, I
on
think
line
you're
6,
still gonna have.
I think you're
reviewer.
still gonna have a problem.
See. So reviewer.request approval. So promise object.
Yeah, so it's not. It's still a promise object.
You could do dot content.
Dot content. Dot content is a nice.
A few months later, you'll be like, why did I do that?
I didn't know you were going to be here tonight. I'm sorry. I would have done this one next one.
Greatest hits.
So dot content, seeing dot thens all over your code,
Yeah.
right? These are more symptoms of the
works.
idea. So this works right here. What we have. What do you guys think of this?
Oh, I thought of another solution.
Okay, what's another solution?
What if you put an alias? So on line 4, you do reviewer computer dot alias model dot reviewer, and then you do get reviewer.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Was it automatically? Wait, what?
Wait, this is going to give you the.
You need a computer to house it get set.
Because maybe that alias will return the content of the promise.
The
Well,
real
you're
reviewer.
Getting the reviewer, so it'll get the content base.
So
You
this,
could do a computer with a getter and a setter.
There's no way.
Why would that be any different?
You have to,
Because it's gonna call get on it.
but it has to go through on the property to dereference the equivalent.
still no?
Nice try though. That was good.
Do you await work then?
Await, I mean, right, so if we had, I don't know if I have await, async
await will
await
work,
set up, but
just-
await works because await is just a promise, just desugars to dot then.
Do you
Right.
do await?
So you would do
Is it
let
await on the this dot get or does
equals
it do the
await.
whole-
Yeah,
this.
you await on the get, and then you yeah.
Do real
Oh.
ES whatever proxies support methods?
They do.
So we could refactor
Now you have to make
promise
that
proxy
basic
to
function.
real JavaScript proxies.
Okay, what else could we do? What's a simpler solution? Besides passing around maybe reviewers and maybe not reviewers everywhere in our application.
Make it
You could
async
write a
false.
CP macro to.
Oh my gosh.
You could use
Simple,
Elm.
simple. You could use Elm, you said?
That's probably the best answer.
No, there's a much simpler solution. Much, much simpler.
Okay, if you're about to whip out your synchronous relationships propaganda, I could have just gone directly to the Russian embassy.
Oh yeah.
It's a great plug.
So we go to post.
Async false.
Monster.
So yeah, basically, you know, that works. So now Joe is happy. Yeah, so I think async relationships, they became the default. They used to not be the default. People wanted to do this kind of pattern of lazily rendering parts of their UI, but from our perspective, there's kind of pros and cons, but the cons are pretty big. And the main con is that you as a developer are looking at this code right here, and you know, what is it doing?
It might just kick off an API call.
Yeah, it might have just kicked off an API call, a network request. And how do you know that? Like, when we load data everywhere in Ember, we do things like store.findAll. It's like very clear from these method names what the code is doing. It's expressive. The fact that get in most situations is just used for local data access, and now all of a sudden it's doing a lot more. It's wrapping a model in a promise proxy object. It's maybe kicking off a network request. Basically, like, we see this leak a lot throughout applications. And so for us, this is the promise proxy bug, and the solution is to use sync relationships.
What is hashtag load?
Hashtag loadable. So it's not hashtag load. It's like, you know how when you document methods, you use it. Anyway, so once you say, okay, I buy your argument, you should use sync relationships, you should load your data explicitly and then access it using, a separate API. The question then becomes, well, I like async relationships because they let me do like each model.comments, and comments are secondary data. So how do I load a post comments if I don't have async relationships? Well, Storefront gives you a loadable API. So if you did want to load the reviewer, instead of doing get, you would do get the model, and then you could just call load reviewer. And now I'm reading this, and I'm like, okay, I know this is a promise. Because it says load. And now I can call reviewer.request. So basically the idea is, like, we want to keep our APIs expressive and clear. We want to communicate the intention to our other developers that, especially when it comes to asynchronicity, because asynchronicity is like what makes our jobs hard again. And so the fact that gets can sometimes do this again, I'm sure you guys can resonate a little bit with having .then sprinkled throughout your code base in areas you didn't expect.
Say the default, say the default is async and it's not loaded. You're in a position then where, what do you do if you do try and get it and you're not in a template? Like,
Great question.
You can do two things. So if you do a .get, it's going to kick off a fetch, a network request, and give you back a promise.
Wait, he's saying if your async is false, right? If your async false and
your async false.
Async false.
Oh, sorry.
and you need to load the data, you don't have it.
You
So
get undefined or null.
so you get undefined or null. So what? Yeah.
But doesn't Ember data have a .load function? You could also do like model.belongs to reviewer.load.
Right. So you could use the references API to load the data. But I think to your question, you're saying okay, sometimes I don't have the data I need, and I do model.comments, post.comments, and Ember data and Ember will load those for me. And now I'm just going to get blank, right? So what do I do? Well, the answer is that, first of all, you're getting the same feedback you would is if you messed up your model route in the route. So we never say, oh, like our model routes, Ember should do its best to try to load the data we think it should. We always define our model routes using like store.findAll and store.findRecord. So I think the fact that you're not seeing any data is enough feedback to know that something's wrong.
Well, no, but I think you're staking out two incoherent positions here between bug, was it 7 and bug 1, which is...
We haven't gotten to bug 7 yet.
This is, you're inherently making whether the data access succeeds or not is inherently stateful. Because, for example, imagine you come in from the main route and that relationship happens to be there because it's declared in the model hook.
Yep.
And you transition to another route. Well, that will happen to be there and it will work, but then if you come in directly to the model route, you have exactly the same problems you had before, right? So I think so in other words, whether that access works is stateful, highly stateful based on the behavior that happened before, right? So it's actually introducing the problem that you were correctly highlighting is incorrect.
I don't understand.
So if you come in from a certain vector point, .get work, and you're using sync relationships, .get works.
Yeah.
If you come in from another vector point that hasn't loaded the relationship,
Right.
.get doesn't work.
So we have an answer for this as well. But the main point here is touche. I think the main thing here to keep in mind is if you are able, this is what I want everyone to think about. If you're able to fully declare your data needs at every point for every state, then the tooling should be able to take care of transitioning between states for you. And the parts where that break down now are the parts where our code isn't fully declarative and where we have these bugs.
I think going with this exercise, would you rather, if you think you have the reviewer loaded and you call request approval, would you rather get an error in the console, or would you rather not have to think about if you have the reviewer loaded, do a .then, and just have it work either way? I think that's what that's the way I look at this, and I think I would want to know, like, if I think I have the reviewer loaded, I'm calling a method and it's not loaded, I would want the error.
But it's unpredictable, right? It's non-deterministic based on the entry point. I think,
Yes.
to me, I like this one better. I like the way you've done here because it makes it very clear that it could be an asynchronous operation. There's no ambiguity about it.
Right.
And yet, there's no path to get to this action that this will fit. I mean, when it's like network errors.
Right.
Yeah. And then this load is like load record, where if it's been loaded, it just instantly fulfills.
I generally like this, I think, as well. Although it does strike me that this feels more imperative in a way than declarative. Like I'm saying right now, try to load this if I don't have it already, as opposed to it being, I don't know, more like in one place saying here's what I need, expect to be true. But that's not what I want to say. What I want to say is when you do the get reviewer, I think if you're taking this approach, you would want that to not give you a null that results in an error. You would want it to explode like right away.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to get a thing that hasn't been loaded.
Yeah, like that's, you want that fast fail.
Yeah.
What is Ecto? Is that the ORM?
Oh, in the template you're saying. In the template you're saying.
Anywhere I effectively do a
Yes.
get reviewer.
Before you're saying if you didn't
before
have the
without
notion,
loading, without having called load.
if you didn't have the notion of a proxy object,
Correct.
and you were just saying right because someone's writing code that says post.get author and it hasn't been loaded yet.
Right.
Right. So yeah, I absolutely agree. This is also the source of. I guess we should let's just go to the last bug really quick because it's kind of tying in.
Tom, do you think it should just, you can write like a method and proxies? Okay.
He approves. Here, do you want to do the thing again?
Did we die?
Yeah, I just heard it. So, right, so I think it's also good for us to take lessons from previous technologies, previous frameworks.
I think the battery did.
Oh, really? That's too bad.
4 out of 20 ain't dead.
Did it die? Are you? Yeah. So lessons from previous tools. So let's look at the last bug and just tie this into this discussion because this is basically you're trying to do something, whether it's invoke a JavaScript function or render a handlebars template, and the data is missing that you thought was there. And so what should be the behavior in that situation? Can your tool be smart enough to marshal the exact data you need such that it might as well do it for you and you don't have to worry about it? It's the one less thing to worry about. Or is it not, can it not do that? So bug 5 basically is just a quick little example where, whoops. Should I change branches during my broccoli build? So again, just really quickly, if we load the post route, we kind of see something funny. If you refresh this, you see a little jump over here, post render, and then all these tags come in. And if we look at the inspector, we see first the post load and then a bunch of these other requests go out. So anyone know what this is? N+1 bug. So N+1 query bug. This comes from, I mean, there's lots of places where this shows up. It shows up a lot in Rails applications. It's actually the same idea that's happening here, which is if we look at the template of the posts index route, we're going to see in each post as posts. And then within this loop, we're going to render a tag list. And then we're going to pass in post.tags. So it's this post.tags, which is kicking off a request. And it's doing it in each loop, in each iteration of the loop. And so what we really want to do is preload the data ahead of time, right? But this kind of, the reason I wanted to jump to this right now is because it comes back to the question of, if you're in a situation, if your tool, Ember is in a situation where it's trying to do something and maybe it doesn't have everything it needs, what should the feedback be? And this is a case where it can do something that gets the screen eventually kind of consistent with how you want it to be. But again, this comes back to the question of, is this the way we wanted our UX to behave in the app? Is this a good thing? Like, are there times where lots of network requests there can be too many, so it messes up your server side and all these things. So,
seems like it's also a learning curve issue though, too. Like, the fact that this does work at all is kind of amazing in and of itself. So, and if I was brand new to like just trying to cobble this together and I got it working, like that's a huge milestone for me, as opposed to
you're saying, and then
that I need to like load something somewhere. I don't know. I would prefer to be told harshly, like, hey, you don't do this, but that would not necessarily be good for
this is a feature instead of one big monolithic request to break it down into micro requests. Much more efficient.
So that's for my ops guy.
So one of the lessons here, Rails has this problem a lot. There's a lot of consultancies that basically end up fixing this bug time and time again. In Ecto, which is the ORM for Phoenix, I was going to say Elixir, but Phoenix, the framework that uses Elixir, they made the decision that if you ever try to, and of course they have a statically typed language, but if you ever try to render a template and you don't have all the data in your template, it's going to just compile time error. So again, the challenge here is that, because JavaScript is dynamic, there's lots of ways to get, especially with a stateful application, every time you introduce a new state, you have new ways to get from old state to the new state. And so there's an argument here to be made where you could say, at least my template knows it needs post.comments, and I'm going to try my best to preload it, but if I don't, because it's just hard to think about all the ways I could get there, then Ember Data is going to have my back. But again, I think the kind of rejoinder would be, but if we have a purely declarative data loading story where no matter how you get to that route, you know you've marshaled the data with this single declaration, and the tooling can take care of it, then you can avoid this problem. So our answer to this bug is to, again, use sync relationships and loadable and all the things we've been talking about. And just out of respect for time, actually this is one we were just going to talk about really quick, which is.
It also relates just to that one right there too.
So we had an app where we were basically had a lot of forms, and forms dealt with like a big graph of objects, of models, like I'll start with a user, but a user had many passports, travel visas, rewards cards, it had many addresses, lots of relationships. And there's like a wizard in the app that you can kind of move through in different ways. And so depending on how you got somewhere, you might have some of those pieces of data loaded, some not. We broke up the forms into lots of components, but those components expected the user to be loaded, let's say, with their visas. And it would often happen that we would get to that place and they didn't have their visas loaded. So what we did was, and this is in Storefront as well, you can play around with it, is this component called assert must preload, which you as an author of a reusable component that's intended to be used with, let's say, a user and some of their relationships. I can just show you what it looks like really quick. It would throw a dev time error if you ever tried to, I think my touch bar is crashing right now. Okay, it would throw an error if you do that. So let's say we had some component right here, and this is user.visas.length. So this component doesn't know how to load a user's visas. It's expecting to be rendered and have the user with their visas already loaded passed in. So what you would do is you can say assert must preload. The user must have, let's say, their visas and their passports. And if this thing ever renders and you've never loaded a user with their visas and passports, you would get a warning message. And so that's nice because you could have a test or just someone doing development like, I got here and I needed to load this. So now, usually what happens is we would get this and we'd realize we need to hoist part of the data loading higher up in the route hierarchy so that you would load it ahead of time. By the time you got there, you have all the data you need. But again, this is just another way to tackle this problem of how do we do our data fetching, how can we improve our data fetching logic.
Is there any kind of like prototypes thing for Ember?
Ember prototypes?
That would make sense. But that's essentially what you're kind of trying to do there. You're trying to do like runtime evaluation of the data to make sure that it conforms to a certain shape.
And you get feedback when it doesn't.
Yeah.
And you get good feedback. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yep.
Do you think about putting those assertions in the component JavaScript file, like in the did insert element hook instead of, or did receive headers or something?
I think you could do that as well. Yep, I think you could do that as well.
But you like having it in the template because it relates to things that are referenced in the template?
Exactly. You're like, oh, I need to add this piece of data to the template. I'm going to add this property. While I'm thinking about it, I open the template at the top. I see, okay, here's, again, a declaration of all the data that this template needs to render. And sometimes we didn't have component files. Sometimes it was just blocks of template. So here's a declaration of everything it needs. If it ever gets there without it, it's going to throw me an error.
Have you thought about whether there's enough information to look at the template and decide?
So that's an interesting question, and I think that's like the dream of like Relay, right? Originally, which is you're rendering some subtree of components, and the tooling can just look and say, here's all the perfect query I need for just the right data from the back end to render all this stuff. Yeah, that's, I guess in theory it's possible. In theory it's possible. I haven't.
I mean, if you could be explicit about what inputs a component takes, and you could describe the shape of those inputs, then you can do all of this. You can statically analyze
Right.
Well, you can statically analyze
To it.
the templates, but not necessarily the component
If you
classes.
use something like prop text, you can start.
In that example, like if a user has some passports, we still want to know that the passports were at least tried to be loaded, had there was an attempt to load them. So even checking the shape.
There are edge cases about like using another computed property to fetch a given property off the model and stuff. But
Yep, interesting stuff. So we had 6 bugs, not 7. Find all and background reload, find all to find record, link by model, promise proxy, n+1 query, missing data bug. So we're trying to make APIs in Storefront that kind of address all these. Again, I think the big ones are the load all and load record, and then also how to deal with sync relationships, kind of in the same way. We have a couple ways that, once we buy into this, if we have an app where we want to make sure no new relationships are async, we have like a linter plugin that we wrote, an ESLint plugin that makes sure they're all async false. And there's some more ideas there too, but that's it. We're Sam and Ryan from Ember Map. You can check out Ember Data Storefront. Let us know if you use it, if you have any feedback, and you can check out more of our work at embermap.com. So thanks a lot.
Hey, real quick,
Super quick.
one more thing on the screen.
If you're going to Evercoff and you're like kind of bored, you need buzzwords. You hear buzzwords, you want to like play bingo. Yay.
Now that I've seen this, I'm going to do a keynote with none of these things in it.
I'm gonna add Preact tonight, among other things that everyone have said tonight. Yeah, I just want to share it because I'm not on Twitter, so if you want to like play with this, it's got a service worker, so like if you lose internet connection while you're in the hallway, you can still play with it. Persist state in local storage. Oh, and the words are random, so like you get new words. If you want to make a pull request and add more words, there's a GitHub link. It's emberbingo.herokuapp.com. It's not really good mobile right now, so if you want to make a PR to add some media queries, that'd be awesome.